And we're live. Hey, I'm Dave Henning with the Fresh Start Podcast, fresh ideas for business and personal growth. And today, I'm Dave, the radio guy, because we're going to talk rock and roll music all day long here. Let me kind of see where we're at here. My guest today, believe it or not, is Christian Swain, creator and CEO of Pantheon Media in the San Francisco Bay Area. He's got a history of working in the broadcast media industry. And what we're talking about today is the Rock and Roll Archaeology Project. What a cool name. He's involved with Sirius XM Satellite and Rolling Stone Magazine. Welcome, Christian. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me. Look forward to sitting down and chatting with you.
Well, let's hit a rewind here and tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you came from, and how you got to where you are now.
Wow, how much time do we have? I'll keep it short and succinct. I am a California native. I was born and bred here in the Golden State, down in Southern California, and migrated up to Northern California in the 90s. But I guess the pertinent information is that I've always been interested in music. I became a musician myself at about 16, or at least I pretended like I was a musician at 16, and then had to learn how to actually be a musician after that. Played music through my teens and my 20s. Tried to make it in original music. The furthest I got was headlining some of the bigger known clubs in the Los Angeles area, places like the Whiskey A Go Go, the Roxy, Troubadour, Country Club, things like that. Never really got signed. Had some demos done by some famous people and things like that. It just didn't happen for me and for a lot of people, and even people with way more talent than I ever had. And then I kind of always had a day job, unlike a lot of my associates at the time who would be more than willing to live in a flea bag motel. I had standards, and so I kind of was always in a job somewhere or another, and that started off in electronics. And moved to tech because there was no tech. There was just electronics. And, I jumped into the tech business in the mid 80s. And on the network side of things, and when the music fell apart, I took that seriously, and I ended up in a tech career, and hence part of the reason why I moved to Northern California. If you know the tech business, the Bay Area is Mecca, and so this is where I needed to be. And I put a 30 years tech business together. I've always been an entrepreneur, so I rarely worked for other companies. I created companies and then contracted with other companies. And so I've always kind of had that business acumen of building companies and putting them together. And then in 2007, I got sold to a fairly large company and made some bank. And I stuck around for a contract, stayed for about 2 years too long. Hated the last 2 years. The first, it was great, but I was an organization about 2025, sold to a company about 1,300, and when I left in 2014, it was 30,000. And wow. And anybody who is an entrepreneur and likes things lean and mean and fast paced, and when you get into a large organization, you're just a number, and it's just shut up and cash your paycheck and do what we tell you, sort of thing. And that doesn't work for me at all.
Right.
So I quit, and I kind of thought about what I wanted to do as a next chapter, and this podcasting thing was relatively new. It starts in the early mid 2000s, but it's really a backwater until about 2013. And in 2013, a podcast called Serial is released, and that's the big moment when podcasting starts to be paid attention to by the media intelligentsia and what have you. So people started talking about it. And I said, well, geez, it's sort of tech. I think I can pivot to putting something together with that. And I started off with doing what and as I said earlier, I've been interested in music since I was young, and my interest was more than just playing. I was always interested in the backstories, or the how to, or and maybe this is comes from this other part of my brain. I read everything I could get my hands on, thinking that the secret sauce was somewhere in these pages, and that would turn me into an overnight success and a rock star and private jets and all the other things that go along with that, right?
Right.
Doesn't exactly work that way, but it provided other opportunities. And because I had this this knowledge, and those of us who grew up in the late 20th century, I would say music was just such an important part of our lives in an outward sense. And music was never that way before. And I doubt it's going to be that way in the future. In fact, it's already seeping back into the background like it was before. It's an entertainment format. It's there to be used. It didn't create tribes and friends or breakups and things like that it did in the late 20th century. I mean, this age of the rock star was an unusual moment for musicians. They were never treated with in any sort of elite sense prior. And and so I also felt that story was coming to an end. And we can call it the rock and roll age, but it's all the music of the late 20th century, and it's really a story about American culture, and American culture being exported around the world post World War II. And so I have a friend, a dear friend that I've known for 40 years. We went to high school together, and we've been arguing about this for 40 years. And I called him up and said, "Hey, I got this idea. What if we do a podcast and we do a scripted deep dive into music, culture, and technology in that late 20th century?" And then I kind of said, "Look, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. I think there's a story here to be told." So we started that 8 years ago. We just released episode 22 on July 5th. In fact, the day before I left to go to Costa Rica. And episode 22 is on the second wave feminism. So we're now in the mid early 70s. And we decided that that we wanted to put a focus, and we do this every once in a while. We put a focus on Black music, we put a focus on women, and show these shifting changes. And so rock and roll archaeology takes us about 3 to 6 months to research, write, and produce each episode.
Wow.
So that hence why we're only at episode 22. But the reality is that this was always thought of as a long form documentary, even a visual documentary. And this is sort of our first pass, our first draft, if you will, to that. And in fact, it is being shopped as a doc right now. I was on a meeting yesterday talking to some people about it. There may be some interest at Paramount presently, but you know how these things go. It's a long process, and this is a big ask. It's the way we have it planned out is 5 seasons, 10 episodes each. That's 50 hours of content. That's a big lift out there. Most we are in a golden age of rock docs right now. But they're usually focused, a band, an artist, a particular movement, maybe sort of thing. And we want to tell the grand scope story, almost like how the West was won, type of thing. And so, like I said, it takes us a long time to put these together. And what ended up happening is, hey, it didn't turn into an overnight success. We do really well. We're in the top tier. In fact, we were the #1 music podcast in 2018. But we had to pivot to some things because number one, it takes us so long to put this together. Our fans were like, "Hey, can you do something in between?" And we said, "Yeah, I think we could do some things." So we created what I call the six originals, and we created 6 original shows to go around rock and roll archaeology, of which I only hosted 1.5. So we did an interview show called Deeper Digs. I did 150 interviews with famous rock stars, producers, engineers, and anybody in the business who would talk to me. And then a show on rock movies, the Rock and Roll Librarian we created, and a couple of others. And then we started having people call us and say, "Hey, can we be on your network?" And we were like, Network? Oh yeah, we have a network. And so now, 8 years on, we've got over 90 shows. We are the premier destination for music podcasting. We created a unique feature called the main feed, and that is kind of like a magazine. All of our shows go into the main feed, so sometimes you can get to about 5 shows a day out there, and you listen to the ones you like and you don't listen to the ones you don't like, and because it's all streaming, nobody really cares about buffering or bandwidth or storage or what have you. And so we have that main feed, and then everybody has their individual feeds as well. And now we're getting involved with other folks like Rolling Stone. We just signed a contract with Rolling Stone. So, hey, there's some news for you right now. We literally just did this on Tuesday. And it looks like, fingers crossed, that we're going to be working with Nick Mason's upcoming Saucer Full of Secrets tour, and a bunch of other things. So it's been a great ride.
So other than that, you're not really doing anything.
Yeah. I'm busy 24/7, 365. Yeah. Except for my time in Costa Rica, which that
was great.
10 days away. Let me tell you.
Great to meet you here. As we mentioned, Seal was here last year, and Jade Jagger, Mick's daughter, came down some years back, and Fleetwood Mac have been here. And
Black Stallion's a music destination, huh?
Yeah. So it's well known around the world, I guess. But all that to say, just the fact that you played at the Troubadour and the Whiskey A Go-Go back in the day, and just amazing your connections with people. I'm passionate about rock and roll history myself, and of course back then, as you know, mid '60s, maybe early '70s. I'm not sure. It was the Wrecking Crew, which recorded. They recorded everybody and everything, and a lot of times, Brian Wilson would be there in the studio, and the Beach Boys would be out touring without him, stuff like that. And then it transitioned to artists writing their own songs and going from analog going to digital nowadays. But go ahead.
Yeah, no, the one of my first interviews when I did Deeper Digs, which I have retired the show, but one of my first interviews was Hal Blaine, the drummer, one of the drummers for the Wrecking Crew. So
awesome.
I'm very familiar with. In fact, I love elevating some of those guys. The Wrecking Crew, Funk Brothers, the A-Team, Swampers. There's Booker T and the MGs and things like that. These who played on just a gazillion songs.
Yes.
I was in a discussion the other day where somebody said, what's a guilty pleasure? And I said, well, I'll give you the story. I loved, when I was a kid, I loved all these pop songs, like The Association or, Brandy, or, these silly, like, one-off songs. Right. And I was always a little embarrassed about that. But when I learned that the Wrecking Crew had played on them, which, they purposefully hid those guys.
Yes,
this was all that wasn't verboten. No, you do not talk about the records you play on. They were almost like stunt doubles, if you will. Right? You're not supposed to see these people. You're supposed to just focus on the stars. So when that came out, starting in about the mid to late 80s, the early 90s, definitely, some of these guys, their stories started to become known. The rock stars themselves started to say, hey, if it wasn't for, I wouldn't be here. Things like that. It was nice to get to see this, these guys who really did the work. And then that made me feel good about these pop songs that I loved that were cheesy, because some of the greatest players in the world were playing on them. So.
Yeah, including Leon Russell from Tulsa and Glenn Campbell. Yeah, Glenn Campbell. Yeah, just amazing history there. So in fact, my understanding is a friend of mine down in Pacific Grove, Monterey area. I think he recorded with Booker T was in the North California area with his own studio.
Booker T lives up in Marin area.
Yeah.
He's a local boy nowadays. Yeah.
And of course you've got Crosby, Stills, Nash. I think David Crosby might be still up in the North Bay. I'm not sure, but
I think he's at a Santa Barbara area.
Okay.
Which I think is where he grew up.
Yeah.
His dad was in the movie business. But
Oh,
yeah, there is some underground rumors that maybe the bad blood, which has happened multiple times with those guys,
I saw the documentary.
might be swept away a little bit again. I mean, they are getting to be ridiculously old, and not they're all not going to be around very much longer. So, there is some rumor. We've had a festival, or not really a festival, but more of a charity event for 30 years called the Bridge School here in
Yes.
area, which is a great cause, and we've actually done some things with them before they retired it. I think in 2016, 2017 was the last one. There's rumor that Neil is going to bring it back this year, and if so, that'd be a good time to reform the old CSNY.
That's right. Yeah, Neil lives over across the mountain over there, heading towards the coast, or he did have a farm over that way.
Well, I've been to the farm. I did get to interview his ex-wife Peggy before she passed, and it's up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, outside Redwood City, up in there, up in the hills is where it was. Now, when he and Peggy divorced, he left her with the property, and he moved to Malibu with Daryl Hannah, and then they've recently, over COVID, they moved to Telluride. So Telluride.
Yeah. Well, believe it or not, I actually worked at Shoreline and on the private events exclusive area back there, so I could go to free concerts. So.
Oh, really? Oh, very cool. Very cool.
I used to ride my bicycle down over the bridge over the highway to the Googleplex and go in there and saw a Dead and Company with and I mean, you name it, country bands, rock bands, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Very, very cool stuff.
That's great. It's a great venue. I always enjoy my time at Shoreline.
So I've got a if you want to say this, I've got a Silicon Valley story. I was writing e-zine articles 15 years ago, and I've been doing podcasts for just about as long, being an old radio guy, bopping around at different places around the country. So I titled this just I'd like to hear what your take on this. I wrote one based on, there is somebody on LinkedIn that posted all these people like Tina Fey was working where she was working when she was 23, and all these different people. It was
I just saw this.
Yeah. So I responded to that. I wrote an e-zine article, 15 years ago, called "Why Old Guys Do It Better," and it was their corporation only lasted 3 years.
Maybe you can get Carly Simon to record that.
Oh yeah.
Why old guys do better.
Yeah, exactly.
I take on the James Bond.
Well, their corporation lasted only 3 years. The band Cream hadn't played together for 37 years, and I was a collector of rock and roll concert DVDs before I left California. But they had retired a year before Woodstock, and I was actually at the real Woodstock down in the Catskill Mountains. 1969.
Were you really at there? I
was there.
There's only 100,000. Actually, I'm sorry, 300,000.
Right.
But I've been told that there's 1 million people who think they were there. So
now,
it could be the drugs. It could be the drugs. Yeah. But you were surely there.
I was 17 years old, and my older brother and his buddy, we drove down from Rochester, New York. It was like a 5-hour drive, and we actually had tickets that never got used. So I had the original tickets, $5 a day, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And as you know, everybody was there. But so they had retired.
So you actually paid. You weren't one of the gate crashers. Okay.
No, well, because we were getting.
And were you there Monday morning when Jimmy played?
Actually, we bailed out because that's the first time that the police cars could leave. Nobody could leave. That the traffic was totally blocked. There was a 2-lane country road. Yeah, we had to walk in Friday evening a little bit late. So, I was definitely there. I was a clueless, dumb 17-year-old. I had no clue about when they were passing a joint. That was later on, the joint age. So, but so Jack and Ginger and Eric, I mean, they sell out Royal Albert Hall in like one day, 4 nights in a row, and then they played at Madison Square Garden that October, and I wrote in my little article, it wasn't some super geeks in the Silicon Valley creating a new PC. Bill Gates and Steve Jobs were 13 years old. Michael Dell was 3 years old. And thanks to Al Gore, according to the Computer History Museum in Mountain View, he invented the internet. And Facebook was 2 years old. YouTube was 3 months old. And yet these old guys, the point being, we're never too old to start something new. And I'm not a young dude anymore, but I try to keep my face, keep my appearances with the Brill cream in my hair. So,
well, hey, look, let's face it. I mean, we are all in a new world. I don't think humanity's seen such a shift in 150 years. The closest thing is the industrial age and the explosion, then the disruption that was caused, but that was also over about a 50-year period. This is done in a 20-year period when you get right down to it. And like all things, it's a double-edged sword. There's a lot of good that comes to it, and there's a lot of bad that comes to it as well. But we are, and again, this kind of fits in what we're trying to do with rock and roll archaeology, which is this world that existed is dying, if not already dead. And while the new world isn't quite birthed yet, we are in that process. And so that leads itself to a lot of opportunity for those who, gravitate to keeping an eye on those things. And to your point, there's one really distinct advantage about getting old, and that's this thing called wisdom, and the ability to kind of suss out, what's real and what's not. Maybe better than those without that life experience out there. And so I think we're seeing, where people with experience have some real value, whereas 20, 30, 40 years ago, you pretty much sent to the pasture when you hit 60.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm passionate about the history, which is what attracted me to wanting to talk to you, because there's kind of a, if our entire life is binge watching stuff, I like to binge watch shows. Okay, that's okay.
Yeah, sure. Mm-hmm.
But if our entire life is the metaverse, where we're kind of making up little fake little cartoons about ourselves, or there's a sense in which we've somehow lost the incredible value of history. There, as you said, wisdom that's out there, especially like you say, to be able to talk to some of these guys and get ladies about their stories, and spread that, say, hey, this is what it was really like in this period, etc. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And in fact, if there's one takeaway that that I feel pretty confident about when, after interviewing, a ton of these people, hundreds of these people, reading these books, having these podcasts, and, being fully immersed in this from top to bottom. And that's the beauty of the internet, is that all of this is freely accessible nowadays. You don't have to hunt very hard. It's not like where the old days you had to crawl into a library and get to the microfiche and find some article from a million years ago, and there's a lot of work in that. I can find anything I want on the Googles in 2 seconds. So it's nice having that ability. But the biggest takeaway I could say from all of this research is that almost to a T, none of these guys had a plan B. It was this or die.
Yes. Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I think that's the case in a lot of endeavors. To really make it, especially in a competitive environment or a mature environment, you just really have to be focused and be willing to give yourself the time to make a success, be able to pivot to the opportunities and the doors that open to you, as long as it fits in your core competencies and your mission statement out there. So that's basically what these guys did. They were focused 100%. And they also, something else I might say is that the right people really are the ones who really made it. They're the ones that really did have something special. They looked at the world a little differently. Their talent was off the charts. They brought something unique to it, something original. They were able to look back and steal from the right influences to create something new. I always point to Prince when I think of that, because to me, Prince he's one of the greatest geniuses of all time in the rock era. But he's a little of James Brown, a little of Jimi Hendrix, and a little Sly Stone. And you take those three and you go, oh my God, that's Prince. Okay. That's the genesis of it. And then the next step is to reiterate and continually trying to improve and change that sauce. And he was able to do that through most of his career.
And Hendrix, if you look back, he was like a band member for James Brown, I believe, way back when.
And Little Richard for sure.
Little Richard, yeah. I met Little Richard in Kansas City when he came to the radio station. I had the morning show there way back when.
He's my favorite of the original class. I think with no Little Richard, no real pizzazz.
Well, the story is, back then there used to be this thing called cameras, and cameras had this stuff called film in them. And so Little Richard comes in for an interview with my buddy Bruce, who's now living down in Ecuador. And I says, Bruce, take a picture of me and Little Richard. And he gets the station camera, and there's no film in it. I've got my arm around Little Richard, and we're right there. And so I can only verify that, according to my memory, that actually happened. That
right.
That there was no digital cameras, no cell phones, none of that stuff. I got to see.
Hey, I want to go back to the Woodstock story, because I always want to ask just one question. Of all of the acts, what's the one that just made you go, oh my God?
Oh, well, I can tell you right now, because of the rain, the thunderstorms.
Because all I know is the film. I've seen the film a million times. But all right.
Well, the Who didn't get to start until almost midnight. They played some of their classic rock songs, and then they went right into Tommy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. And I'm just thinking about makes what hair is left on the back of my neck stand up. But they start almost at midnight, and they're going through the entire rock opera Tommy, and the sun comes up, no rain, and they get to that song, Good Morning Campers. I mean, they could not have, I don't think they meant to time it that way, but the sun's coming up and they sing Good Morning Campers. And wow, I mean, that's very memorable. And of course, the big fringe jackets and the arm,
the windmills, both Roger and Pete, with their windmills, right.
Exactly. So I got to see Elton John in San Francisco a couple years ago, and I just saw a recent documentary about him. He calls it Before the Drug Days, when him and Bernie Taupin was sending him like 4 lyrics a day, and he was sitting down at the piano, no practice, and writing the music to these songs. I had all his early albums, and the fact that he was, like you were talking about, cranking out 4 songs a day and knock it out.
4 classics, not just songs. 4 classics.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Well, in our latest episode 22, which I hold on a second. I should pull this up just so I know. I'm having a hard time remembering this particular title. It's called Second Wave, but there's a Joan Didion quote that follows it, and that's the thing I keep forgetting. On the morning after the 60s. Okay, the second wave on the morning after the 60s, and we spend a bit of time on Carole King's Tapestry. And the story about Tapestry is that we found interesting was that Joni Mitchell is recording at A&M Studios at the exact same time she's recording Blue, and she's got Studio C booked, and Carol's supposed to be in Studio B, but this red piano, which is very famous red piano, was in Studio C. So that meant she had 3 hours a day that she could get in there before Joni would come. And so they cranked out that entire album. Like every day, there were like 2 or 3 of these songs that they recorded there in a 3-hour period. One of the biggest selling albums of all time. The whole thing was done in about 2 weeks, and it was released about 2 weeks after that. And not expecting this to be anything more than just a nice personal, album that will, continue to solidify Carol's position as a well-known songwriter out there, mostly for other people, and enhance her career. But as we now know,
boom,
it was a giant. So you never know. You never know how these things go. All you can do is the work. And
I love the reunion concert with her and James Taylor going back to the Troubadour and all the LA places that they played. Amazing, the duets and stuff.
Well, you mentioned the Wrecking Crew, which is that early to mid 60s. They kind of took over from the guys in the Suits in the 60s, and then the next iteration in LA was called the Section, that was and that kind of came out of the James Taylor band. So it was Danny Kortchmar, who grew up with James Taylor, on guitar, Russ Kunkel on drums, and Lee Sklar on bass, along with Craig Durgy on keys. And most of those guys are playing like on all of these, the James Taylors, and in fact, the entire Running on Empty, a live album, the Jackson Browne album, is those guys. And most of them are on Carol's Tapestry, because that came from James, who the key to all of that is Peter Asher,
Peter,
kind of an Apple guy, Beatles guy. He brought a couple of English cats over to kind of say, LA's the place to be. We're going to restart this thing. And sure enough, that's what happened.
Well, what got me cranked on even being in radio, I was a high school kid in Rochester, New York, when WLS Chicago was a Midwest farm report station. And when the Beatles the British invasion happened, WLS switched to rock and roll, Stones and everybody else. And at nighttime, I could pick it up in my little transistor radio clear over in Rochester, New York, on their night signal. And I'm thinking, I want to be a disc jockey. And so that was the majority of my career before getting into the sales and copywriting and production side of it. But who was it that?
February 9th, 1964. Beatles and Ed Sullivan. That is a game changer. It is without doubt. It is, and we say this in our podcast and constantly whenever it's brought up, that it is the single most important cultural event of the 20th century. Is the Beatles showing up? They just the everything that follows that is and it's still being birthed today in weird ways. I mean, the Rolling Stones, these guys are 80 years old and they're still able to sell out stadiums around the world. That's ridiculous, but because they're associated with that moment. I love the Stones, don't get me wrong. And I kind of in some ways prefer them over the Beatles. Nobody's got anything on the Beatles. The Beatles are the Beatles, and then there's everybody else. So, 500 years from now, everybody will know who the Beatles are. Okay. As long as we still exist, everybody will know who the Beatles are. But some of these other guys, they're going to be like Salieri from the movie Amadeus, big in their moment, big at their time, really important, but nobody remembers who the fuck they are.
One-hit wonders. I saw the Stones with at the Charlotte Panthers Stadium, sold out. event there, or whatever that holds. I don't know, 80,000 people or something. And that
yeah.
was Blues Traveler was their warm up band. Oh my God, John Popper with
Oh,
that.
John's, yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah, Mick and those guys, a lot of those guys were on some of the Beatles recordings, All You Need Is Love and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Well, remember the Stones' first hit was penned by John and Paul.
Yeah, see,
I want to be your man. Right. So
awesome.
It's all incestuous, and the music industry is a really small industry. Most people don't recognize that. Even at its peak, there were maybe 1,000 people who were really deep involved in it. Now today it's a little different. I mean, this was a resource that was scarce. That's not the case today. Music is ubiquitous. It's free, or relatively free. And there's no monoculture. There's no charts that are the be all end all. Even the pop charts aren't. They're specific to certain groups of people, and there are many other groups of people that like other things. So we just don't live in a world that would make something like the Beatles happen today.
Sure. And as you know the story, I mean, they were rejected a gazillion times very early on.
Oh yeah. They ended up on Parlophone, and what most people don't understand is that George Martin was a producer of comedy records.
Really?
That's what Parlophone was mostly about. But and here's the connective tissue, is that the Beatles loved this British duo called the Goons. It was like a precursor to Monty Python,
right?
Spike Mulligan, I believe, and and did Dudley Moore come from that, or this whole group was around there? I might be wrong on that, but definitely Spike Mulligan. And George Martin produced their records, their comedy albums. So when they got together, there was this this friendly banter that endeared the Fab Four to George Martin, that made him go, all right, I'll take a chance because to your point, they'd been rejected by everybody out there, and this was their last opportunity. So even though people think of them as like, oh, they're on EMI or Capitol here in the States, no, they were on Parlophone to start with, which was literally a backwater label in the UK at the time.
Yeah. Oh yeah, exactly. And of course, George Harrison paid for Monty Python's movie.
Yeah. So the circle continues, right? So Life of Brian is the most expensive home movie ever made.
The home movie. Yeah, seriously. Well, that's very cool. The thread of history that you don't see. Those are the kind of little tidbits of trivia that people just don't know about. And I think
that's what you get with rock and roll archaeology. You dive deep, and you will we will smack the knowledge down for you. Definitely.
Yeah. So you are the founder of Rock and Roll Archaeology. I'm speaking with Christian Swain, and you're also the creator and CEO of Pantheon Media. And so you go way back through a lot of stuff in your own personal career, as well as Silicon Valley stuff. So that's very cool to have you with me. Any particular memory you've got? Your memory banks are pretty full there, as McCartney says on his last album. But anything that really just stands out to you that you'd like to leave with our audience? That just somebody, some story, my brother, who's no longer with us, he was a pretty much even more of a wise guy than me, but he got on an elevator in New York City with Prince, and Prince had the cane. So my brother on the elevator asks Prince, so do you really need that cane, or is it just for effect? He would just meet people and off the wall stuff like that.
And what was Prince's answer?
I don't really know what his response was. Maybe a smirk. I don't really.
Do you know how long ago it was?
Oh, well, that would have been my brother loved New York Yankees, and it might have been it'd been quite a while ago. Maybe, I don't know, probably before Prince passed away.
I'm sure we can put that down as a marker, but that was my point, is that Prince, as we know, died of a fentanyl overdose, and
Hmm.
he had been on prescription opioids for many years, due primarily to hip issues. And
Oh my
so,
gosh.
the question being, was the cane for effect or needed?
Ah,
Later in life, the cane was probably needed, and
yeah.
not just for effect. But I wouldn't put it past Prince or even myself to walk around with a cane just because it looks cool.
It's cool, right? Well,
Yeah.
speaking of fentanyl, of course, Tom Petty touring with a
Yeah,
broken
yeah.
hip.
Same year. Yeah, yeah.
Sad
Yeah, well,
situation.
David Bowie as well. Not to fentanyl,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
to me that was the biggest loss. I
yeah.
personally think that the Starman really was an alien from another dimension, and that when he was called back, we were sent into an alternate universe, because the last half decade have been like insanity. So
Oh yeah.
we need him back to kind of right the world, if you ask
Yes,
me. But
I hear you.
yeah, I mean, rock stars I've met a ton. I've had my share of sitting down and just having a good time, and hanging out backstages and all that stuff. So I'm not quite sure what story to share, other than I think what we put together with Pantheon Media, and I do want to call out some of my partners. Like I said, Richard Evans and I are the ones that created Rock and Roll Archaeology, and our chief engineer is Jerry Danielson, who also I've known for 40 years, and it's still an active musician and owns his own studio. He's the guy that actually ended up working in the music business throughout his entire life.
Yeah.
And then my business partner Peter Ferrioli, that came on to do marketing, and then is between the two of us are the ones that have created this network, and these other opportunities that have come along with that. So instead of diving back so far in the past, which I do every day, the recent history has actually been really, really interesting. The last couple of years of watching the company really become a company. Podcasting was a bit of a hobbyist sort of sport until about 2017. That's when Spotify decided it was going to take an interest in that, and they spent about $1 billion acquiring a bunch of companies, and that of course lit the fire to everybody else, realizing that this was not a fad, that this is going to be the future of radio, that audio as a format has a very viable future, and we just happen to be at the right place at the right time. We started at a great moment. We were always worried we were going to be behind the wave, and we ended up being way in front of the wave, and
Yeah.
it's just in the last couple of years it's really turned into an industry. So we're really excited to see where this is going to go. And for your listeners, I guarantee you go to pantheonpodcasts.com, and you will find a show or set of shows that will be your cup of tea.
Very cool. A couple of quick last questions I'd like to wrap up with. So first of all, what was your instrument of choice when you were a rock and roll dude, young man?
Well, I still am a rock and roll dude. So I've had a cover
Yeah.
band for the last 17 years called Tin Man.
Excellent. Excellent.
There's the coffee cup. And yeah, coffee cup with me. There's me on it.
Sweet.
And so we've been playing throughout Northern California for the last 17 years. So I still play.
Awesome.
Well, let's see. I'm going to let you guess. What do you think my instrument of choice is?
Okay. Well, I had a black Eric Stratocaster, and then a cherry red precision bass that I played around with. I played the keyboard. So I don't know, man. Okay, wait, let me guess. Harmonica.
I do play a little harmonica, but no, that's not my main interest.
I don't know. I'm looking. I don't see anything
Instrument.
in your background there.
Well, there are a couple of guitars back here. There's let's see, my Martin's right there.
Sweet.
But I'm a strummer. I play rhythm guitar.
Gotcha. Yeah.
My fingers aren't fast enough to play lead, which means I was left with the one and only job that I could do, which was get up and shake my ass and get the girls excited. So I am a lead singer by choice, and I love being the front man. It's as I said, when I was a kid, when I started, I didn't. I didn't have parents that said, "Hey, you need to learn an instrument or do this sort of stuff." This was all done on my own,
Sure.
and I jumped around the bed for 3 or 4 years when my aunt gave me a record player and some leftover albums, and that was my real beginning education of music. And I went to a bunch of high schools. My parents moved around a lot, and on the third one, the first day, I walk in and literally this kid comes up to me. I mean, this is in 5 minutes, and says, "Hey, you're new here. What do you do?"
Oh,
And
wow.
I said, "I sing for rock bands." I'd never sang for it other than with a hairbrush on my bed. And he goes, "I know a band that's looking for a singer." And
Oh my gosh.
by lunch, I had met the guys, and that afternoon I was in a garage singing.
Man. Yeah.
Badly,
Oh.
I must say. But the one thing I was born with was a natural ham. So that was the easy part. The singing part I had to learn, but the act like I know what I was doing. Oh, I'm really good at that.
There you go. There you go. Well, my first guitar was the same as Joe Walsh. It was a black Spanish F-hole guitar, a Sears Silvertone out of the Sears
Oh
catalog,
yeah, I know.
which was the early version of Amazon 100 and some years ago.
Yeah. And the guitar player in that first band,
Yeah.
Silvertone, Sears Silvertone. Yeah,
Exactly. That's
Yep.
what I had. And I was trading guitars ever since. But all that to say, my next to the last question is, what was your very first job when you were a kid or a teenager? Like what kind of entrepreneurial thing, paid or unpaid?
Uh, okay.
Come on,
This
spill
this
the
this
beans.
this always makes me look bad. It's not as bad as it sounds.
Who cares?
So I was a scout. Got Boy's Life. I'm sure you know the magazine. Boy's
I
Life.
was a scout.
In the back of the Boy's Life, you could order greeting cards. Do you remember that?
Oh, I did that. Door to
So,
door.
Door to door. Well, here's the bad part. So I knocked door to door and got a lot of doors slammed on my face.
Of course.
Until I changed my pitch. And the pitch became that I was doing this for mentally handicapped kids. Let me tell you, I sold a ton of greeting cards until one day I knocked on a door for somebody who does a lot of work with mentally handicapped kids.
Oh, no. Oh, my God.
Yeah, so I got in a bit of trouble for that. Who are your parents? Where do you live? That sort of thing. I didn't get as much trouble as you might think. I got a talking to, and was like, okay, but I then learned that sales was that's an interesting job, and I was pretty good at it.
Yeah, absolutely. So back to what you're saying about your natural born ham.
There you have it.
Well, all right. So wait a minute. Didn't I just see you?
I'm probably 12 at that time doing that.
You were probably like, didn't I see you on TikTok's twerking the other day?
Hey, if there's money in it, sure I'll do it.
So okay. So last question: If you could speak to anybody, if you could sit down and ask questions or speak to or meet with anybody in the world, alive or dead, who would you want to just meet and talk and just have that? My friend John Maxwell got to interview John Wooden from
Oh yeah,
UCLA.
UCLA. Yeah. Kareem
and
Abdul-Jabbar. Yeah.
and Maxwell wrote down 3 or 4 pages of questions to interview the great John Wooden.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question to you is, not that you're going to interview them, but who would you just wish you could meet historically or whatever, dead or alive, somebody, anybody?
Wow, that's a very complicated question for me. I mean, I am a student of history. I mean, I could wax on between the modern world to the ancient world to the prehistoric world.
Yep.
I have always gravitated to that. I've always been interested in that since I was a little tiny kid. History has always been a big interest to me. Probably, my dad was. He was, 10 to 15 during World War II. So, and that was the biggest story in the world when I was growing up. And let's face it, it was a big giant story, and it still is impactful. Not quite as it was in the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, but it's still pretty impactful. And so because of that, I probably gravitated to just a deep interest in history, and then I also have some obsession with time, and ever since I was like a baby, I've been some obsession with time and how time works and what time is and things like that. So anyway, I'm going to take this 2 parts. I know for a doubt 100% the Holy Grail, the white whale for me, somebody who's living, is Paul McCartney. I mean, to sit down with Paul McCartney and just pick his brain about, to the point, as I made earlier, I really want to try to get his thoughts on what's it like to be Mozart. What's it like that you're going to be remembered 500 years from now. There's no question you're going to be remembered here in that sort of sense. So what is that like? And I'm sure as a humble man that he is, I'm really going to have to pull it out of him, to really get him to think about what that means. And, I mean, I think, chances are he's going to say a lot of luck, the right people, I ran into John on a lark, just all these things, we just happen to be at the right place at the right time, because actually, and I'll say, when we started the Rock and Roll Archaeology project, one of the biggest questions I always had, and I know the answer now, but I couldn't quite figure it out, was how is it that the 2 greatest musical geniuses of the 20th century lived 1 mile apart of each other? So is it nature or nurture, or, how does that work? And the long and short of it is it's an emotional connection. Both their mothers died as teenagers.
Yes.
And I think that created this unique bond that will allow them to be more intimate than most friends and working partners. And I think that probably had a little bit. So living, without doubt, Paul McCartney. My personal hero in music is David Bowie. So, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. And anything I've ever read about David Bowie is that you want to talk about the ultimate party guest. He is the ultimate party guest. He is completely erudite. He is a huge reader. His interests are wide and deep, and he could wax on anything in the most charming manner possible. So if I could do that, that would be the ultimate interview for me.
Cool. I have a little quick Paul McCartney story that you may or may not be aware of, but Phil Kagi came in he had a little band in Ohio years ago, and he sounded like Paul McCartney when he was young. And so Paul invited Phil to sing at Paul's daughter's wedding years
Stella
ago. I think it was Stella. Yeah. And so, Phil got to hang out with Paul, and they put their guitars down, sat down, and, played Yesterday and all this bunch of stuff or whatever they played. But I thought that was a really cool thing that Phil was certainly honored with that. But he came into our studio with a guy named Paul Clark back in Kansas City a long time ago. But anyway, we've spent a lot of time chatting and talking about stuff, and so great to
Oh
have
no,
you with
Dave,
me.
this has been great. It's been fantastic. Great questions, and thanks very much for having me and allowing me to fill your audience heads with rock and roll knowledge.
So we want our listeners to go to pantheonmedia.com. Is that right?
Pantheon Podcasts.
Pantheon
That's plural.
Podcast.
Pantheonpodcast.com. And you can find us on Facebook at Pantheon Podcasts or Instagram or Twitter, Pantheon Pods. And anybody can reach out to me and, ask me questions, and I'll try to get back to them best I can. I am kind of busy running a company and putting on these shows. We just launched a show with Sirius XM called Basic. And like I said, we've got Rolling Stone coming up, and which is news for you. And we might be doing some stuff with Nick Mason's tour. So here's a question before I go. How many rock acts end up in Costa Rica?
Well, they all seem to wander down here, as well as movie stars, down here.
But to play, I mean, like to play, not to vacation.
Oh, yeah.
Tour. I'm talking about tour.
Well, I don't know the answer to that, but they like to come down here and hang out and ride horses or something. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
So glad to meet you right here in Costa Rica a couple weeks ago, and glad to have him on my show. I'm speaking with Christian Swain. I'm Dave Henning with the Fresh Start Podcast. Fresh ideas for business and personal growth. And we're going to wrap this thing up in just a second here. And here we go.